I can determine whether a number is a factor of a given number. Let's look at this lesson's essential question. How can you tell whether one number is a factor of another number? So let's review. How are multiplication and division related? Pause this video and turn and talk to your partner. Well, they're related because they are inverse or opposite operations. For example, 3 times 8 equals 24. But if I wanted to divide 24 by 8, well, that would be 3. Or if I wanted to divide 24 by 3, that would be 8. So, how would we be able to use division to find the unknown factor in 4 times n being the unknown factor, equals 24? Pause this video and turn and talk to your partner. Well, if we wanted to find out what the unknown factor was, all we would have to do is divide 24 by 4. And that would give us 6. So n, the unknown factor, would be 6. Because 4 times 6 equals 24. Let's look at this following problem. Students in Carlos's art class painted 32 square tiles for a mosaic. And this is the mosaic right here. They will arrange the tiles to make a rectangle. Can the rectangle have 32 tiles arranged into 3 equal rows without gaps or overlaps? So the first thing, as always, when answering a question is to make sure you know what they're asking you. So here is the question part of the word problem. Can the rectangle have 32 tiles arranged into 3 equal rows without gaps or overlaps? So gaps are spaces, and overlaps are putting tiles on top of each other. So they basically want the mosaic to be flat, such as in this one here. So go ahead and take 32 tiles and figure out if you can arrange the tiles into 3 equal rows to make a rectangle. You can also just try drawing it onto grid paper if you'd like. Pause this video and work with your partner. Okay, so what did you come up with? Were you able to arrange the tiles into 3 equal rows to make a rectangle? Well, actually you weren't able to, because putting it into 3 rows would be 3, since it has to be 3 equal rows. Then we have 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, 31, and 32. So that's our 32 square tiles, and as you can see, it is not a rectangle. Remember that a rectangle array has the same number of tiles in each row and the same number of tiles in each column. This is missing 1. Therefore, the answer to this question is no. We can also draw this array using grid paper, and it would look like this. So we would have that 30 right here, but that's 32, so we would have to add 2 more, which would be right here. So as you can see, this is definitely not a rectangle. So if we wanted to solve a problem like this, using models or drawing an array on grid paper could help us solve this problem, but sometimes the materials that are required for arranging tiles may not always be available. So you can draw a model as a simpler method to use. But let's look at another way. Because using tiles or drawing a diagram can be time-consuming. So let's use division, which would be a more efficient method. So basically, we're talking about 32 tiles, and we do want to divide it into 3 equal rows. So let's divide 32 into 3 equal rows. So go ahead and work this out in your notebooks or in your workbook and pause this video until you're ready. Okay, so dividing 32 into 3 would look like this. So we have 32, and we do want to divide it by 3. So we know that 10 times 3 is 30, and we have 2 left over. And so that would be a remainder of 2, which we see right here in our arrangement. The 2 here and the 2 there. So that remainder will help us answer the question because there is a remainder in the division. We know that 32 cannot be arranged into 3 rows without gaps or overlaps. And basically, this remainder over here basically tells us that we are going to have one column with only 2 tiles, when really we need 3. So let's talk about some divisibility rules. These are little tricks that we can use to tell whether one number is divisible by another number. And if it's divisible by another number, then we know that it is a factor of that number. So basically, a number is divisible by another number if the quotient is a counting number and the remainder is 0. So going back to our last problem, we divided 32 into 3, and we saw that it was 10 with a remainder of 2. Therefore, 32 is not divisible by 3, and that means that 3 is not a factor of 32. Let's look at a chart over here. Well, in order to be divisible by 3, the sum of the digits has to be divisible by 3. So in other words, we're looking at the 3 and the 2. So we would add that together. 3 plus 2 equals 5. 5 is not divisible by 3. So therefore, 3 is not a factor of 32. Let's look at what else we have here. So we have, if a number is even, then it is divisible by 2. So for example, if we're talking about the number 12, or if we're talking about the number 312, they're both even, therefore it is divisible by 2, and therefore 2 is a factor of 12 and is a factor of 312. Let's look at the number 5. If the last digit is 0 or 5, then it is divisible by 5, and 5 is a factor of that number. So for example, we could be talking about the number 95. It ends in a 5, so 5 is a factor of 95. We could also be talking about the number 4080, and so we know that 5 is a factor of 480. If the number is even and divisible by 3, then it is divisible by 6. So, for example, Let's look at the number 72. Let's test for divisibility by 6. Well, first, is it even? Yes, it ends in 2, so it is even. Well, let's get the sum of the digits, because that's how we could test for the divisibility by 3. So 7 plus 2 equals 9, and 9 is divisible by 3 because 3 times 3 equals 9. Therefore, the number 72 is divisible by 6. And in other words, 6 is a factor of 72. And last, we know that a number is divisible by 9 if the sum of the digits is divisible by 9. So for example, let's look at the number 540. Well, let's add those digits up. 5 plus 4 plus 0 equals 9, and 9 is definitely divisible by 9. So 9 is a factor of 540. Well, looking at the numbers here, why do you think that there isn't a divisibility rule for 1? Well, that's because all numbers are divisible by 1 already. And why do you think there isn't a divisibility rule for 0? Well, because you cannot divide by 0. In this lesson, you learned how to determine whether a number is a factor of a given number.